Hello, today we're going to discuss style sheets and formatting. So as you can see here, we're going to be using Module 2 for this discussion. So if you have a copy of Module 2, it's a good idea to have it out in front of you. But I'm also going to be showing it on the screen here as we go. So let's start by going to page 12. As we see here, style sheets and citation formats. That's what we're looking at in this video. So we go to page 12. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so here we are on page 12 in the module. And we have the question here, what are style sheets and citation formats? Now this is going to be a quite important issue for you in this course because one of the requirements for each essay that you submit is that you use the proper style sheet and the proper citation formats. In fact, this is one of the basic requirements, and your essays will not even be accepted for evaluation unless you use the proper style sheet and citation formats. You don't have to be perfect in order to have your essay accepted, but you have to at least show that you have tried to use the correct style sheet and citation formats. So let's start by just making sure we understand what a style sheet is. So we're going to read through this text together. And it starts by saying this. Imagine that you work for an academic or professional publication. This is an academic class, an academic writing class. We're learning how to write theses primarily, how to write a diploma thesis or a master's thesis. But you can also think of this as, in some ways, a course in professional writing, especially if you're going to try to publish anything in a professional publication. A magazine or a journal, for instance, connected with your profession, whatever it might be. So I want you to imagine for a moment that you are somebody who works for one of these publications. Every month you receive hundreds of pages of writing from people who want to publish their ideas. And this is quite normal, that these journals, these magazines, specialist magazines, they get a lot of submissions. A lot of people want to publish their work. So you're working for this publication, you're working for this magazine or journal, you receive all these hundreds of pages of writing. So it says you have two jobs. First, you have to read this work and check it for mistakes. Then you have to change it to fit the style of your publication. Every publication has its own style. That is, it uses a particular font, page layout, etc. Okay, let me make sure that you understand what we mean here. As it says next, you may have noticed the different appearances of various magazines and newspapers. Right? So you may notice, for instance, that a tabloid newspaper has a very different appearance than another kind of newspaper, a more traditional, what we call in English, broadsheet newspaper, the bigger ones that open up and fold out much more complicated way. And you may notice that every issue of a certain tabloid looks roughly the same in some ways. It has the same logo on the front, it has uses the same kind of font. By font I mean Polish czcionka, right? And puts the page numbers in the same places every time so that it's easily recognizable. If you go to the corner store and you're looking for a copy of Gazeta Fakt, it's easy to find. You can recognize it by the logo, and it looks the same every month. Although it will have different headlines, different stories, and different pictures, still the basic layout and organization is the same. And every magazine, every publication has its own style, its own appearance. Usually it has the same kind of cover every month, although it may have a different picture, but the general look of it is roughly the same. So this is true of academic publications as well. They have styles as well, as it says here. Okay. As an editor, your problem is that your writers all want to format their documents differently. For example, some put their page numbers in the top right-hand corner of the pages. That's what we've done here in this module. Other writers, however, when they send you their work, they put their page numbers in the bottom left-hand corner. So perhaps they put it down here at the bottom part of the page. See, I've got something else down here in the bottom part of each page in this module. Other writers don't bother to put page numbers at all, so they don't even include page numbers. Some of them maybe put it in the center at the top, some of them in the right-hand corner, some of them in the bottom corner, and this is going to be a problem for you as the editor because that means you have to change it. You have to decide, well, what does our magazine do? What does our publication do? Well, we always put the page numbers in the top right-hand corner. So every writer who sends you work with the page number here or down here or at the top or at the bottom or some other place where it shouldn't be, that means you have to change it. So that's more work for the editor. But the page number is only one possible issue here. Let's look at the next part of our text here. Some writers use 2.5 centimeter margins, others 3 centimeters or 0.5 centimeters. Margins are these side parts of the page here, on the sides and at the top, the white space around the words. These we call the margins. So 2.5 centimeter margin means the space between the words and the edge of the page is 2.5 centimeters. And maybe all these different writers who are sending work to your publication have different margins. Some have bigger ones, some have smaller ones, and this again is going to be a problem for you because now you have to change. Anything that you put into your magazine has to have the same kind of margins, so you have to adjust the margins for every piece of work that's submitted to you. Some of the writers use large letters, large type, meaning they use big letters, maybe 14 or 16 points, that type. Others use very small letters. Some print their articles in bright colors or with amusing fonts or with odd uses of underlining and italics. People do all kinds of strange things when they are creating their texts. They have their own tastes and the ways they like to do things. But the result for you as the editor of this publication is more work. It takes you much longer to read all of these submissions. For instance, you might be reading and saying, well, what page is this? Wait a minute, where did this writer put his page numbers again? Oh, over here. Okay, the last writer put them in a different place. This adds a little bit of extra time and work. Plus, it adds hours of extra formatting work because you have to make each article fit the style of your publication. So you choose an article from a certain writer. You say, okay, well, I have to move all the page numbers and change the margins and change the font sizes. Everything has to be made to fit the style of my publication. So this is a lot of extra work because all the writers are doing things differently, and but when I publish my magazine, I need it to look the same. So then one day you have an idea. So you are the editor of this magazine or this journal. You have an idea. You send all of your writers a list of instructions for presenting their writing. Every writer who submits work to your publication must follow certain rules for the use of fonts, page numbers, etc. So you say, if you want to publish your work in my magazine, here are some rules. I want you to put your page numbers on the top right-hand corner. I want you to have margins of 2.5 centimeters. I want you to use 12-point Times New Roman font when you submit your text. Then what happens is that every submission looks the same. So all the writers who send you work, all of their submissions look the same, and you don't have to make so many changes when you put the text into your magazine, into your publication. It saves me, as the editor, a lot of work. If you are the editor, as we're pretending here, it saves you a lot of work. It does create more work for the writers. The writers have to prepare their text carefully before they send it. But that's part of life when you're a writer. So this list of instructions is very useful, and as it says here, these lists of instructions are called style sheets. So this is a term we'll be using in this course. Style sheet. And it's just a list of instructions for how to prepare your text before you send it to the publication. And it is essential that academic writers learn to use them. Right? Anytime that I send something, for instance, to an academic journal, I have to know what the style sheet is for that journal. What do they want text to look like when they receive it? The same thing will be true when you write your diploma thesis or your master's thesis someday. You will get a style sheet, you will get a list of instructions from your supervisor, and you'll have to follow it. It's just a reality of writing in any kind of professional or academic context. So those are style sheets, a list of instructions. And why don't we skip ahead a little bit here and have a look at the style sheet for our course. Now, I've created my own style sheet for you, and this is actually quite a simple style sheet. I've tried to create something for you that's not too complicated. I remember several years ago I published a book, and when I submitted the text to the publishers, they gave me this huge style sheet, and it was probably about 10 pages long, all kinds of little instructions, explaining exactly how I had to prepare the text before I sent it to them. And this was to save them work, right? They didn't want to have to make all these changes themselves, so they asked me to do it. This is normal. It's absolutely normal in the world of publishing. So my style sheet is much shorter. It's not 10 pages long. It's much, much shorter, much simpler. But this is perhaps your first experience with a style sheet, so I didn't want it to be too intimidating or frightening for you. So let's look here. We're on page 14 in the module. Style sheet for second year writing. So this course only. And I say this course only because you probably will use a different kind of style sheet when you write a diploma thesis or a master's thesis. So it's important to be aware that the style sheet will be different in different situations. And whenever you're writing something in a professional or academic context, you should always say, always ask for the style sheet so you know what instructions to follow. So these are the instructions for this course. Style sheet for second year writing. Part A, general appearance of document. Okay, your essay should be printed on plain white A4 paper on one side of each page only. Okay, so don't use any colored paper, no blue or pink or purple or red paper. And some of these instructions you may think seem silly, like would somebody really do it in a different way? And I have to tell you that yes, when I first started teaching, before I was explicit, before I gave my students detailed instructions, students would be very creative, and some of them would submit their essays on colored paper, things that I never imagined they would do. So we have very specific instructions here. Plain white A4 paper on one side of each page only, right? So letters on one side and the other side will be blank. Margins should be 2.5 centimeters on all sides. Okay? So that means on the left side of the page, on the right side of the page, on the top of the page, on the bottom of the page, the white space should be 2.5 centimeters. And you can adjust this using your word processing program. You can adjust the margins to have them fit these specifications. And our next instruction, C here. Each page should be numbered on the top right-hand side of the page. Start numbering on the first page. Okay, so you're going to start the numbering on the first page. The very first page I see should have a number 1 on it, on the top right-hand side of the page. Some publications don't want a number on the first page. They say, start on the second page with number 2. That's why this instruction here is so specific, because some publications have different rules about this. But here I want you to put the number on the first page. Start with number 1 on the first page. Okay, D. The font being the type of letters that you use, in Polish Citation, I believe. The font throughout the essay should be Arial 12 point. Okay, Arial is a very common standard font. In fact, that's what I'm using here in this module. 12 point, this is how big it is. This is the size of the letters. Right? If it's 72 point, it might be this big. If it's not 8 point, it might be so small you can hardly read it. 12 point is a standard size, an ordinary size for font. So the font throughout the essay should always be Arial 12 point. Do not use bold type. Bold is when you make the letters darker, darker and more black. So this style sheet says don't do that. Don't ever use bold type. Italics. It says use italics only for emphasis. Italics is when you change the letters to make them look sort of slanted. And I'm not sure of the Polish word for this, but I think you know what I mean. Right? So it's not the regular letters, but it's the letters that are kind of slanted like this. In English, we call those italics. Use italics only for emphasis, so when you want to give extra emphasis to a word, or when required by citation format guidelines. So this has to do with footnotes and things. So in some of your footnotes and in your bibliography, you will need to use italics. Use only black ink. Okay, so your letters should be black. Now, I'm going to ask you to submit your essays by email, primarily, unless I give instructions that you can print them. But in general, I ask my students to submit their essays by email or through the eStudio system. So you don't have to worry necessarily about the black ink, but the letters should be black when I open the document. So you can change the color of your letters to red or pink or blue, but I don't want you to do that. I want the letters to be black. That's what the style sheet says. Okay, next one. All essay text should be double-spaced. Now, double-spaced, this is a concept that students sometimes don't understand. In Polish, I think the term for this is interlinia. It's the space between two lines of text. So I have one line of text here, one line of words, and then another line of words underneath it. If it's double-spaced, it means there's extra space between the lines. So there's one line of text, and then a blank line, and then another line of text. So it should be interlinia 2. Okay? All essay text should be double-spaced. That's how we say it in English. And we're going to look at some samples in a little while where we'll talk about this double spacing, things like that. However, there is an exception. So except for quotations requiring 4 lines of text or more. All right, so special rules for the long quotations, what we call the block quotations in English. These long quotations should be single-spaced, so the lines will not have extra space between them. They will be close together, like a normal text. Like the text we have here, this is single-spaced text. There's an extra space between each bullet point here, between E and F, for instance, with single space, single space, single space, and then we go to the next one, it's double-spaced to go to the next one. Okay, so your block quotation should be single-spaced and presented in block form. This is also explained in the quotations part of Module 2. With approximately 10 spaces of extra indentation. Indentation means when you push the text over from the side of the page. So a block quotation is pushed over from the side of the page. Now, if you're having trouble remembering what this looks like, go back to the earlier part of the module. We're on page 14 here. I'm just going to go back to the section on quotations. Back to page 7. So easy to find the page numbers when I know they will always be in the top right-hand corner. This is one reason why we have style sheets. Okay, so here on page 7, we're looking at block quotations. And you can see here that this block quotation is pushed in from the side of the page. Right? So here's the regular essay text, as Dan Walker explains, blah, blah, blah. And then the block quotation is pushed in a little bit more. So extra indentation. Okay, back to page 14. So the first line, sorry, we're talking about the block quotation. So the block quotation should be single-spaced, presented in block form, with approximately 10 spaces of extra indentation. So you go hit the space bar, bump, 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 and push them over. Next one. The first line of each paragraph should be indented approximately 10 spaces. So whenever you start a new paragraph, the first line gets pushed in a little bit, 10 spaces. It might not be exactly 10 spaces, but it should be the same for every paragraph. It says here, indenting should be consistent within the essay. And remember, indenting or indentation is when you push the words over a little bit from the edge of the page. Next one. Except where indented as in F, essay text should be left aligned. Okay? So left aligned means down the left side of the page, the text should go in a smooth line down the edge of the page. Okay? But on the right side of the page, the text should be kind of making a, it should not be aligned to the edge of the page. It should kind of move in and out. It's what we call ragged right in justification in English. And that's in fact kind of what we're using here, because you can see, for instance, when we're looking at our style sheet here, that each subsection in section A, like A, B, C, D, E, F, if you look down the edge of the text, it's a straight line down along the left side. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. The text has got a nice straight line down it. But look at the other side. The text, if you were to try and draw a straight line down the right side of the page, the text would be not touching it. So the text, we say in English, we say the text is left aligned, or it's left justified, we could also say. Justified to the left. So a nice straight line. But on the right side, it's not. It's just kind of loose. We don't make all the text touch the left side of the margin. Sorry, touch the right side of the margin. So this is called a ragged right justification. The left side is straight, the right side is ragged, meaning kind of not straight, kind of rough and torn looking, you might say. Which is a very nice style, actually, this ragged right style. It looks more natural than when the text is justified to both sides, where it's straight down both sides of the page. Okay, subheaders may be used when needed. So this is if you have sections in your essay and you want to give each section a little title, you can do that. Our essays are fairly short in this class, so you probably won't need subheaders. Subheaders being kind of little titles inside the essay. If you do put these in your essay, the subheaders should be an Arial 12-point type with title capitalization, which will be described below in section C, subsection C, and spaced appropriately for clarity. Okay, so space them so that they are not touching the text above or below them, the subheaders. But don't worry about this unless you want to have subheaders, unless you want to have sections with little titles of their own inside your essay. Not really recommended usually for this kind of essay. Maybe for the analytical essay, which is longer than the other essays, subheaders and sections might be useful. Okay, so we're discussing all this in a rather dry, technical way here, but this is what style sheets usually look like. They give you these kind of instructions. We're going to look at some samples, as I say, in a couple of minutes, so you can see what these instructions look like in practice. Okay, then it says author information. Your essay should contain the following information in the top left-hand corner of the first page. Each item should be on a separate line. These items should be double-spaced. Okay. And it should be your name, first name and then last name, the course and the group, the instructor's name, and then the date of submission, the day that you submit it, in the English format of date. Now that's not specified here, by the way, but maybe it should be. But the date of submission should be there. Okay, so that's top left-hand corner of the first page. Title. Your essay should have an original title suggesting the essay's main idea. Okay, and on to page 15. This title should be centered above the first paragraph on the first page. It may be triple-spaced for clarity, so you can put some extra white space above and below the title, so that it's easier to see. The first letters of all words, except minor words that are not the first word of the title, should be capitalized. Okay, so let's pretend this is a title of my essay. You can see that most of these words are capitalized. The first letter of the title is always capitalized, even though the word "the" is quite a minor, small word. The literature is capitalized, but you notice "and" is not. Little words like "and" and "the" are usually not capitalized in titles. Then this has a capital letter, and this has a capital letter, and this has a capital letter, and this has a capital letter. This is what we do in titles. We don't do this kind of thing anywhere else in the essay, usually. Okay? But notice that and of don't have any capital letters. So this is how your title should look. Now at this point you may be thinking, wow, these instructions are really detailed and they might seem to you kind of pointless. I mean, why does anyone care about these things? Well, the reason why is that if you are, well, remember, we're thinking about this in terms of the real world and real publishing and real academic situations. And again, if you have a magazine and you have 10 articles in it, and each article has its title, you want them to all look kind of the same, right? You don't want them to be you don't want them to be capitalized in some different way so that it looks kind of strange, or like some of them have mistakes in them. And every publication does this. All the magazines and newspapers you read have rules like this. But as the reader, you just usually don't know about these rules. You just see that the magazine kind of looks the same. Every page kind of has some kind of rules that it's following that maybe you don't even notice. Okay. And the last one, the title should be in Arial 12-point type. So the same as the rest of the text. Do not use bold or italic type. So don't do anything fancy with the title, just normal Arial 12-point. Do not underline the title. Do not enclose it in quotation marks. Do not end the title with a period or a full stop, as they sometimes call it. Do not decorate the title in any way. So again, this is something that students often want to do with the titles of their essays. They want to decorate them and make them look nice. But that's not what this is about. It's not about looking nice. It's about following the rules of the style sheet. Okay. Then it says citation format. Okay, it says students should cite sources using the citation format outlined on page 16 and 19 of this module. Okay, we're going to come back to that idea of citation formats in a minute. But it does say you have to use the citation format that is in Module 2, pages 16 to 19. Okay, so citation format, what this means is how you handle footnotes and bibliography, information about your sources. You have certain rules to follow. And this style sheet says you have to use the rules in this module. Then there's a sample essay. A sample essay using the above style guidelines may be found on page 20 of this module. Okay, so let's go look at that, and we'll see what this style sheet looks like when we are using it. So we'll go to page 20. We'll skip some stuff here. So here is a little bit of sample text. It's using the style sheet that we've just described. So there's a page number. It's in the top right-hand corner. Now, normally, if you were sending an essay to me, the first page would have number 1. But since this is in the module, it has page 20 on it. But the page number is in the top right-hand corner. Here's the author information. Notice all of this text kind of looks the same. It's all Arial 12-point font. You can see that there's double spacing here because there is, we have a line of text and then another line of text and another line. But in between each line, there is a line of white space. So there's a line of text, line of white space, line of text, line of white space. This is what we call double-spaced text. So that's correct. We can also see that it's got the ragged right justification. Down the left side of the page, over here, or like the E and H and O, and down this side of the page here. It's a nice straight line down the left side, except for the paragraph indentation. On the right side, you can see that the text goes kind of all over the place. It doesn't touch the margin, and that's okay. This is the ragged right style justification, otherwise known as left-aligned text or left-justified text. So it's lined up down the left side of the page. What else can we notice here? Well, the author information is presented correctly. So we have the author's name here, Jan Kowalski, the course. This must be for the online version of the course. The instructor, oh, there's my wife, Heidi Hartigan. But since you're going to be writing for me, it will be S. Hartigan here. And then the date when this essay was submitted. So that's the day you send it to the instructor. Not the day that you finish it, but the day you send it. Okay, and let's see here. Oh, here's the title. Notice the title is not decorated in any way. It's just normal Arial 12-point text. But it has the special capitalization. First letter is capitalized, and then this letter is capitalized, and this little letter is capitalized. Because it's the beginning of this text after the colon, here after this little 2 dots, the colon we called it, so the A has a capital letter. And this is V is capitalized, A, but the 2 is not. And that's all right. That's how it should be for a title capitalization. Then the W is capitalized and the I is capitalized. So this is proper capitalizing of the title. Then we have the first paragraph. And notice that it's indented. The first line is indented. The other lines are not. So this line starting sentence is pushed over. And it's pushed over the same amount as the first line of this paragraph here. And so it's kind of a nice line up between the first lines of each paragraph. They start in the same place on the page. But then the next lines, second and third and fourth, they all are left justified down the left side of the margin here. Okay, so that looks good. It's indented, it's double spaced, it's in the right, the proper font, proper size, got double spacing, proper justification, everything looks nice, doesn't it? And then we've got some quotations and some footnotes, so it's using the proper citation format. We'll go back to that in a minute. And it has a long quotation here. And it's properly formatted in the block format, single-spaced, not double-spaced. It's got 4 lines or more of text. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. So 4 lines or more of quotation should be in this format. This is a quotation here. This is a quote, what you would call in Polish a cytat, but in English we say quotation, from a book. And we can see what book because we look at the footnote. Whoops, sorry. We look at the footnote here, footnote 2. We go down to 2, and it's from a book, or actually from an article, it turns out, by a man named Charles Cooper. The article is called An Outline for Writing Sentence Combining Problems. It's published in a journal, a kind of magazine, called English Journal, volume 62, published in 1973, so it's pretty old, on page 99. That's where Jan Kowalski got this quotation. And this is what you're going to do with all your sources in your essays, by the way, is create these nice little footnotes for them. Okay, so I think you get the idea. At the end, there's a bibliography that gives a list of all the sources, and you notice it uses roughly the same, uses the same style sheet as the other parts of the essay. It's Arial 12-point font, it's double-spaced, etc., etc. Okay, so that's a general look at the idea of the style sheet. Now let's have a look at another sample on page 22 of the module. This is a sample essay with incorrect formatting. So here, the style sheet has not been followed properly. The writer has not followed instructions. If you want a little assignment for yourself, a little practice, just pause this video and have a look at this sample text on page 22 of the module and see if you can identify all the different ways that this writer has not followed instructions. If a student submitted an essay like this, if a student gave me an essay like this, I would just send it back and say, this does not meet the basic requirements. You have not even tried to follow the style sheet. So you can pause it and have a look. See if you can find all the problems here. Okay, so I assume that maybe you've taken a few minutes to look at this text and see if you can find all the ways it's not formatted properly. In fact, there are quite a lot of ways. It's not following our style sheet. You'll notice, we'll start with the author instruction, author information. This is not right. It's got Kowalski Jan, but you remember the style sheet said put your first name first and then your last name, Jan Kowalski. So seems like a very small thing, but the writer has not followed the instructions. Then it says Pisania 2. Is that the thing that we see here? Well, second year writing. Okay, well, he's got the course name here, although he's written it in Polish. Instructor. Well, again, it's for my wife, but that's all right, since she was originally... she also teaches this course sometimes. Heidi Hartigan. But the author, Mr. Kowalski, has spelled the name incorrectly. Okay, that's not good. You should always spell your instructor's name correctly, or your supervisor if you're writing your diploma or master's thesis. Anytime you have to write someone else's name in your academic writing, make sure you spell it correctly, because some people are really bothered by this kind of mistake. I'm not too bothered by it, but I will notice it, and I will encourage you not to do it, not to make this mistake. So make sure you get the instructor's name right, because some people really don't like it when their names are misspelled. The title is not formatted properly. It's underlined. We don't want that in this style sheet. The capitalization is not right. Every letter is capitalized here. This is not what we want. It's got a period at the end. The style sheet said don't put periods at the end of the title. Okay, so this title is not at all what the style sheet said to do. What else have we got here? Well, we've got ragged right justification. So that's good. It's a straight line. The text makes a nice straight line down the left side of the page. On the right side of the page is kind of bumpy. That's what we want, so the justification is okay. But the first line of each paragraph is not indented. So this first line of the first paragraph, where it says life in modern technological societies, this line should be pushed over. And same with this line. This line should be pushed over, and same with this line. Should be pushed over. So the first line of each paragraph should be indented all throughout the essay. Also, the font is not correct. This looks like Times New Roman font. We should have Arial 12 point. Okay, so the font is not correct. So Mr. Kowalski has not followed instructions. And what else do we have here? Well, the proper citation format is not used. He doesn't use footnotes. Now, our style sheet specifies that you must use footnotes. But Mr. Kowalski is not using footnotes here. He's using another way of identifying his sources. And that can be perfectly fine if the style sheet tells you to do it this way, what we call parenthetical citations, because it's inside the parentheses. But our style sheet said not to do this. Our style sheet said use footnotes. So Mr. Kowalski has not done that either. Okay, so lots of mistakes in formatting on this one. It should not look like this. It should look like this. This is what your essays should look like, because that's the style sheet that we have for this course. Okay, so that's a little bit of information about style sheets, and in more detail about the style sheet that I am requiring you to use for this course. So your essays should all look like this one on page 20. Now, I promised I was going to talk to you a little bit about citation formats. So we're going to go back to page 15. Well, we were looking at page 14, where it gives us the style sheet, right? And we're looking at the second page of the style sheet, where it says citation format. Now, citation format is the special rules that you follow for using sources. Whenever you use a source, you know that you have to tell your reader which source you're using and what page the material comes from. We have to do that every time we quote something, or we paraphrase, or use any information or ideas from somebody else. We always have to tell our reader that we're doing that, Otherwise, we might be accused of plagiarism, and we definitely don't want that. That's almost the worst thing that we can do in an essay or academic writing, is to plagiarize, or popełnić plagiat, as they say in Polish. Definitely, we don't want to do this. So, we have to handle our sources properly. And this style sheet tells us that we have to use a citation format. And as I just said a moment ago, citation format is the special rules that you use for handling your sources, for presenting your sources in your essay. And it says, students should cite sources using the citation format outlined on pages 16 to 19 of the module. Okay, let's go see what that looks like. Oh dear, look at these instructions. Now, citation formats are often very sort of horrible looking things, filled with all kinds of very technical, detailed instructions. And you know, this is just one of the realities of academic writing. One of the realities of professional writing. You know, you have to learn how to use these kinds of things. And I'm going to try and make it as simple as I can for you. Let's just look at the general instructions here. Let's look at the title of this section, actually. Citation format. Footnotes and bibliography. Okay. So there's really two parts to this citation format. Footnotes and the bibliography. Footnotes is where every time you use a source in your text, you give a little footnote, a little numbered note, to tell your reader where this material comes from. And the bibliography is at the end of your essay. It's a list of all the sources that you use. Now, there are other kinds of citation formats that don't use footnotes. They have this information about the sources included right in the text. For example, that incorrect sample that we looked at a minute ago had that kind of citation in it. But we're not going to use that in our course. Our style sheet said use this citation format, the one that's on page 16 in the module, and that's what we got here. So the first thing is, it says place footnotes at the bottom of each page. Okay, so if you're going to have footnotes, they go at the bottom of the page. Footnotes are have those little numbers that are kind of up above the other parts of the text. And how are we going to do footnotes? Okay, so to make a footnote, we have to include lots of information here. And here's a list of all the different things that you've got to include in your footnotes. And you notice they're a little different. Footnotes for books or articles in books are a little different than footnotes for articles in periodicals. Periodical means a magazine or a journal or something like that. It's going to be a little different for internet sources. Now, you can go through all these instructions, and sometimes you will need to refer to these instructions to make sure you're doing it properly. The easiest way to do footnotes, in my experience, is to look at examples and to try to make your footnotes look like the examples. So let's look at some examples, some sample footnotes. So here's a sample footnote for a book. And in this case, the footnote is for a book by a man named Northrop Frye. He's actually quite famous Canadian literary scholar. Northrop is his first name. Frye is his last name. So here's what the footnote looks like. Northrop Frye's first name, last name, and then a comma. Now when you're learning about footnotes and when you're making your own footnotes, you have to pay very careful attention to a lot of little details. First name, last name, comma. The comma is important. The punctuation is important when you're doing footnotes. You have to follow these rules so that all the footnotes in your essay look more or less the same. They're going to follow the same pattern. If you don't do this, it looks very messy. And we don't want that. Then we have the title of his book, Anatomy of Criticism for Essays. Notice that this is in italics, the sort of slanted letters we talked about. Right? So this is normal text, and this is italics text, italic text. So the title of the book is in italic font. It's in italics. All right. Now we have information about the publishing company that published this book. And this is information is in parentheses. These little brackets here, these round brackets, also called parentheses. First we have the name of the city where the book was published, Princeton. This is in a small city in America. And then we have a colon, these little 2 dots here. And then the name of the publishing company, Princeton University Press. So this is the company that published this book. And in fact, it's not really a commercial business. It's a department of the university, Princeton University, which is quite famous, famous American university. And most big universities have their own little publishing companies, you might say, where they can publish books sometimes from their own professors, sometimes from other professors too. So Princeton is the town or the city, and then Princeton University Press, the publishing company. Then we have a comma, and then the year that the book was published, 1957. Then another parenthesis, then another comma, and again we have to do it just like this when we're doing our essays. And then P for page, and then a dot, and then 52, the page number for the quotation that this footnote is for, and then a period at the end of the footnote. So if you're making a footnote for a book, it should look just like this. It's going to be a different book and a different author, different city, different publishing company, different year, different page number, but the way it looks on the page should be exactly the same. So first name, last name, comma, title of the book in italics, parentheses, round bracket, name of the town or the city where it was published, colon, these 2 dots, name of the publishing company, comma, year the book was published, then the other round bracket, close parentheses, comma, then the page number, and the dot, P, and then a dot, and then 52 is the page number, and then another dot or a period there. So that's the first time that you do a footnote from Northrop Frye's Anatomy of Criticism. Now, if you have many footnotes from the same source, this sometimes can happen if you have a longer work, longer essay, or it will happen a lot if you're writing a thesis. Sometimes you don't have to do the whole footnote every time. And that's how it works with our style sheet in our citation format. The first time I have a footnote from Northrop Frye, I have to put all of this information here. But every other footnote, if I have another one and another one later on in the essay, I don't need to do all of that again. I can just do his last name, Frye, comma, title of the book, and here it's just a shorter version of the title. I didn't give the whole title, I just gave enough of the title so that someone reading my essay will know what book I'm talking about. Title, and then a comma, and then the P for page 52, looks just the same as here, and then a period. Okay, so that's the first time I have a footnote for Northrop Frye, and that's the second time. So when do we use these footnotes? Well, anytime we use a source material in our essay. If I have a quotation, at the end of the quotation, I put a footnote. And just to refresh your memory, let's look at our sample essay, the good one, on page 20. It's got some footnotes here. Look in this first paragraph. Here we've got a nice quotation. Whoops, sorry. A man named Kellogg Hunt, sort of strange name. He writes that sentence combining takes one sentence of a certain sort and another of a certain sort and combines them to produce one new sentence. So that's a quotation here. This material is quoted from Kellogg Hunt's book. I put it in this essay, and I need to give, sorry, it keeps jumping away from me here. I need to give a footnote, so that's what that little number 1 is. If you go down to the bottom of the page, you can see there's the footnote down here. The number is, and there it tells all the information about where I got that quotation. Kellogg Hunt, from an article called How Little Sentences Grow into Big Ones, In, oh, so it's an article in a book. So some books have a collection of little essays or articles in them. And that's what we have here. And here's the name of the book, New Directions in Elementary English. And then ED is for an editor. Okay, we need the name of the editor of this book, a man named Alexander Fraser. And then here we have the city where it was published, Champaign, Illinois. That's what that IL is there. It's Illinois, the American state of Illinois. Then the name of the publishing company, which has this rather strange name, NOTE. Something probably like National Organization of Teachers of English. That's my guess what that stands for. And then a comma. Then the year was published, 1967. And then P60. So that's the footnote for this citation. I hope that makes I hope that makes sense for you. Okay, we'll go back now to our Northrop Frye here. So you may be asking yourself at this point, all right, well, I've got my source and I've used the quotation in my essay, but where do I get all this information about the city and the publishing company and the year? Well, that information is usually on the inside, in the first few pages of a book. If you open a book and look at the first few pages before the actual writing starts, there's all kinds of publication information, usually in the first couple of pages after the cover, after you open the cover. And so if you look on those pages, you can find all this information usually. The city where it was published, the publishing company, and the year should all be there. So that's the most simple kind of footnote when you just have a book. It gets a little more complicated sometimes if you have an article in a book, like we did when we were looking at the sample essay. The rules are basically the same, but sometimes a little different. So here we have another article in a book. The author's name is Kemp Malone. Then we have a comma. Then the title of the article. Now you notice the title of the article is not in italics. It's in quotation marks, or inverted commas, as they say in Britain, here and here. So there's the title of the article, and a comma inside the quotation marks, interestingly, right here. And then we have in with a colon, and that means which book is this article in. Then we have the title of the book, Studies in Heroic Legend and Current Speech, comma. Then ED, that's going to tell us who the editors, the people who put this book together, are. Simon Einarsson and Neil Eliasson, or Eliasson, I don't know how that's pronounced. And you notice it's first name, last name, first name, last name. So these are the editors of the book. And then we have the information about where the book was published. Copenhagen. It's the city. Then we have a colon. The name of the publishing company, Rosenkild and Bagger, comma, the year, and then the pages in the book where this article was located. And if you were quoting from just one page, you would just have that one page there. PP means several pages. So whatever this is referring to, whatever this footnote number 3 refers to, it includes material from 21 pages. Usually in your essay you won't be doing that. You'll just have one P. 2 P's is plural, pages. 1 P just means on one page. Okay? Now I'm not going to go through all of these because there's too many of them. But you have to decide, first thing you have to decide is what kind of source do you have? And then you have to look at this module 2 and try to find the examples for the kind of source that you have. So books, articles in periodicals. So this is articles in magazines or newspapers or something. And here you're going to have the author, the name of the article, then the name of the journal or the name of the magazine. Then sometimes you have to have more information like which volume. Sometimes every year they have what they call a new volume of this magazine. And that information will usually be on the cover of the magazine. Or if you're getting the material from the internet, usually it will be on the first page of the article. It will give the information about the original source. The year, and then the pages, or maybe just the one page if you're referring only to one page. Here's another example. In this case we've got volume 20, number 5. So some magazines have both volumes and numbers. Now, you don't need necessarily to know what these mean exactly. You just know that you have to include them in your footnote if the original source has this information available. So when you're looking at an article, if it says this comes from American German Review, volume 20, number 5, 1954, well, you put all that into your footnote. I should mention, if you're not sure how to do this when you're working on an essay, if you're kind of confused and you're not sure if you're doing it right, please feel free to contact me, to email me, and ask me if you're doing it right, and I'll be happy to try and help you if I can. Remember, you're never alone in this course. If things start to get too confusing, feel free to contact me and I'll try to help you out. And as with the books, you can do a short forms. You know, if you use the John R. Fry footnote, you don't have to put, and you want to do more footnotes from the same source, you don't have to put all this stuff every time. You could do a short form. So footnote 5 has got all this information. This is probably the first footnote from this source. And the next one, any other footnotes from the same source, we can use a short form of the footnote like that. Internet sources. Now probably many of your sources will be from the internet. It seems it's more and more common now. You still have to give a footnote, and it's just going to be a little bit different. So here we have the author's name, and then the name of the article that we found on the internet, the name of the website where the article was published. So this is the article, but then the article is usually included on some website that has its own name. For instance, if you found an article on the Gazeta Wyborcza website, you would have the article name here, and then here you would have Gazeta Wyborcza. Then the year that the website was created. Now sometimes that's not available. Sometimes you just don't have that information. It's not included on the website. If you don't have that information, then just don't put this in your footnote. Just leave it out. Then we have the web address. So this is the URL, we say in English, the actual information that you would write into your internet browser if you wanted to find this article. And then here we have the date that, if I was making this footnote, this is the date that I looked at it on the internet. So 5th of December 2006, so many years ago, I guess. So obviously you were going to be using a different year than this. And the reason this is included is because sometimes internet sources change from one day to another. So you just include the date that you looked at it as part of your footnote. So if it changes, well then you can say, well, it was this is what the text looked like this on 5th of December 2006. Maybe it's changed now. Now sometimes with internet sources you don't know the name of the author. There's no author included on the website, on the web page that you're looking at. If that happens, then you just give the name of the article. Okay? You would remove the author's name, because if you don't have it, you can't give it. So you just give the name of the article, then the website, and so on. Okay, so those are some of the rules that you'll be following when you're putting together footnotes for your essays for this course. Now, if this seems overwhelming, like too many little things to remember, well, there are a lot of things to remember, but remember you have your module here to look at. So when you have figured out what kind of source you've got, look at the example footnotes that you can find here in the module and try to make your footnotes look like these ones. That's the easiest way to do it. If you get confused and you're really not sure how to do it, then you can look at the more detailed instructions that are written out for you here, but those might just be more confusing. If you're really stuck, you can ask me again. Say, I'm working on my footnote, this is what I've done, this is what it looks like. Can you tell me if I'm doing it right? Feel free to send me emails like that. Obviously I can't do the footnotes for you, but I can tell you if you're going in the right direction. The other thing you can do is bring some of your work to our consultation sessions, and you could show me and say, well, here are some of my footnotes, am I doing it right? And I'll be happy to give you suggestions there. The last thing I'll mention is the bibliographical entries. Right? So this is the list of all of your sources that you will put at the end of your essay. It says compile all items in a single list labeled bibliography. So let's just jump ahead to our sample essay again. So we're going to page 20 and then 21. At the end of the sample essay, you can see there's the bibliography. And at the end of each one of your essays, you will have a bibliography as well. Bibliography just means a list of your sources. So here are the list of sources for this essay. There were only 3. And the list is organized in a certain way. It's organized by the names of the authors. So you can see the first part of each entry, we say, each bibliography entry, the first part is the name of the author. So here it's Charles Cooper, and then Kellogg Hunt, and William Strong. But things are a little bit different than the footnotes. Okay? So they're, in many ways, they look exactly the same as the footnotes, but they are a little bit different. For one thing, you'll notice the last name comes first in the bibliography entry. In the footnote, it said Charles Cooper, but here it says Cooper, comma, Charles. Here it's Hunt, comma, Kellogg. When you look at the footnotes, it's Kellogg Hunt and Charles Cooper. And Strong, comma, William. Then they're listed in a certain order, in alphabetical order. So it's C, Cooper, H, Hunt, S, Strong. So C comes before H comes before S. So they're listed like this. This is so it's easy to find the one that you want, right? You say, wow, where did that material come from, that William Strong? What was the name of that book again? You can look in the bibliography, Cooper, Hunt, Strong, you know it's going to be under S, and then sentence combining, a composing book, etc., etc. And the bibliography follows very similar rules, very similar to the footnote, but a little bit different. For instance, the name's different, as we just seen. We can look at some other differences here. If we look at the Charles Cooper one, Charles Cooper, An Outline for Writing Sentence Combining Problems, English Journal, Volume 62, 1973, page 99. Well, we have all the same information in the bibliography. It's just a little bit different. The rules are slightly different. You'll notice here, we don't have any parentheses. We don't have any round brackets. Here we had the year, 1973, was in round brackets. Here it's not. The rules are a little different for bibliography entries. I think that's just about the only thing that's different. No, something else that's different. There's a comma here, an outline for writing sentence combining problems, comma, and then English Journal. Down here, an outline for writing sentence combining problems, period, and then English Journal. And here it's a period too, after Charles, but here it's a comma. Now these things seem like, you may think, is this small and kind of unimportant? Well, we're not curing cancer here, but these are the rules, these are the instructions, and it's to make sure that all the footnotes look kind of the same and all the bibliography entries look roughly the same. It's to create the style for this particular publication that we are pretending that we have in our academic writing class. And we have similar kinds of changes here. Again, it's for the Kellogg Hunt bibliography entry. It's the same information that we have in the footnote, but it's presented a little bit differently. Here we have commas, here we have periods. We don't have the parentheses here that we do have up here. Up here, all the name of the publication information for this book is all included in parentheses, and down here it's not. So again, my advice to you is, when you're working on your bibliography for your essays, figure out first what kind of source do you have, then go to Module 2 and look at the samples. First, for the footnotes, and then for bibliography entries. So here under section 7 on page 18 of the module, we have sample bibliographical entries for books, articles in periodicals. And again, periodical just means a journal or a magazine, something like that, or newspaper. Articles in books, internet sources. Here's the example down here. And this one's almost the same as the footnote format, just a little bit different between footnote and bibliographical formats here. Okay, so a lot of little technical details when we're dealing with citation formats. The most important thing to remember is that there are a lot of little technical details and that you will not remember them. You are not going to remember all of these things. Unless you use the same citation format every day for years, it's impossible to remember all these little details. So what do? You go to your style sheet, you go to your module, in our case, and you look at the examples and say, I need my footnotes to look like these ones. And if you're not sure what to do, and if you get confused, then you can ask me for if you're doing it right. If you were working in the real world, you could call up the editor of the journal, the editor of the magazine, and ask if you're doing it right. In this course, you can send me an email and I'll help you, or ask me during one of our consultations. So that's an introduction to style sheets and citation formats. And remember that even though all this stuff seems very technical, we're doing it for a reason. Probably the most immediate, important reason is that you will have to do this when you write a diploma thesis or a master's thesis. So this is actually useful for you. It's preparing you for work to come, for work in your future. And also preparing you for writing in the professional world as well, where anytime you write for publications, for magazines or anything like that, usually there is some kind of style sheet, instructions that you have to follow. And after you're finished our academic writing course here, you will be ready. You'll be ready for that. So that's our long-term goal. So thank you very much, and feel free to ask me if you have questions about any of this material. Thank you.